Guys, we're back in Needham this week. We're gonna catch up with Mikey. Last week we were installing the second gable wall. We had the first one up, and now we have our sidewalls on and stacks of these trusses. These trusses are for the primary roof. Mike, there's a lot of trusses up here.
There is.
So why are we prefabricating these trusses rather than, I mean, we're stick building the roof essentially.
Yep.
At one point we were thinking about prefabricating trusses. Let's talk about that first. Why are we building these on site versus getting them manufactured elsewhere?
There was just a concern with hitting all the marks that we needed it to. That roof, it's an uncommon pitch. It's steeper than normal. We want to make sure that when we put these in place, they're also going to hit the exterior wall perfectly, making sure that we're not, having to mess around with, fascias and soffits and rework a bunch of stuff. So collectively, we agreed that building them on site would be yield the best result.
Yeah, and I saw you had done a weekly video, which if you guys are building with us, you would know, but every Friday we do this weekly video for our homeowners. Basically, Mike walks around and shows what's going on, gets them all pumped up, tells them to have a good weekend, and then we get back to it. But I saw in our weekly update, I think, is this what we got going on the floor here? So walk us through this.
All right, so tough to see, but this line here represents the face of our stud wall. So that line snapped. They got a stop block on the outside. We got another.
So you have the same thing over here.
Same thing on the other side.
You have
so
two walls.
This is, yes, our office and primary suite walls.
Right.
And then we snapped out the pitch of the roof, and that comes up here to our center point with some more stop blocks. So we can pre-cut all the rafters. They had a station set up in the back, slung them up here onto the deck, and now we have these blocks that are going to put us in the same spot every single time.
And this is really why it was so important to get the floor system in the right spot and also pull parallel from our control line. If these walls weren't parallel, you'd have to cut every one in place because you wouldn't guarantee if the walls were parallel. Those walls we know are parallel, so we have blocks that basically replicate those walls. You're gonna be in his way here?
We might be. Demetrius is gonna take us out.
He'll let us know, he'll give us the beat. So it is a 17 pitch.
Yeah.
And so you're fabricating everything here.
Yes. Yep. So that 17 pitch is the exterior, but then we're also doing sloped ceiling joists down below, which will also help lock all these walls together and stop any like movement outwards.
So 17 pitch, really, really tall ceiling. You can see behind us how tall that is, but we do have a collar tie about maybe a little under halfway up, or a little over halfway up. And then under that, we're actually going to have a sloped ceiling. So outside 17 pitch, what's the inside ceiling?
It's a 8 pitch.
So 8 pitch, and this is what these lines represent here.
Yep. So that was all laid out, so we know exactly where to put that collar tie.
Gotcha. So everything is marked out on the floor. You're building the trusses. Now they're all fabricated. Why double 2x?
Structural.
Structural.
Yep. That was something that was driven by the structural engineer. So they wanted everything doubled up, double collar ties, and
beefy.
Beefy.
So these are being installed. Up there, I noticed, I saw you talking with Dimitri right before they started installing. You caught something. What was that? Yeah,
so in between each truss, we got to put blocking in to help keep everything lined up. And obviously the plywood's going to lock that in too. But the blocking was pushed all the way up, and we just wanted to drop that down, or we decided about cutting a notch in it to allow venting.
Gotcha.
Otherwise it would have been blocked off.
So why are we venting that roof?
To make it a cold roof. So our insulation is going to be down below that. We need to create airflow that's going to go from our vented soffit all the way out through the ridge.
A lot of times you see spray foam being used in all of these projects. We actively avoid it just because we find that there's better opportunities for air sealing, which a lot of people use it for, which we're using the Siga products for, but then also healthier alternatives really, and that's why we're using all stone wall bats in our framing. So in that whole roof, you'll actually be Rockwool across the entire roof line, but while doing that, because you don't have your vapor control there, you actually need to ventilate that, and which you're referring to as a cold roof. So so we're ventilating it. You have these notches at the top, so we're going to be ventilating it out of a ridge vent.
Yes.
Where does that air enter that roof line?
A soffit vent. So down at the, it'll be down in, like, if you're looking at your rafter tail, once we build out our soffits, we'll have a vent in there that'll allow air to come in and then travel up this rafter and escape up and out through the top.
So one detail that you probably can't tell here just yet, but we have 2x12, and then you're basically dropped down to a 2x6.
Yep.
This is where they're sitting on your wall plate.
Correct.
And this is your overhang. We're actually not going to be plumb soffits. They're going to be parallel to the roof.
Yep.
But also in a lot of locations, which I'm not sure which one, maybe these, you're actually going to be extending on them with here.
You can see where it's stacked, yeah.
So these here, this is where these are not only longer, but in the final condition, they get a swoop.
Yep. So there'll be a little overframing that goes with that.
And that's on the left side, which covers, we have an entrance out to a small step into the front office,
yeah.
But also along that whole back.
Yep.
So why don't we walk over there while they're getting that truss set up. Question on Instagram came up is, why is this wall plywooded? Shear.
Yep.
So we're dealing with really, like we've talked about the double stud. A lot of you guys asked why didn't we use LVL or LSL. It really came down to cost.
Yeah.
Now correct me if I'm wrong. We had priced it out. Are they 3 times the money?
Pretty close. It was a 12-inch LVL that was 20 feet long versus a 2x12, 20 feet long. One was 200, one was 67.
Yeah. So obviously that's in a larger format than a wall stud, but we're dealing with similar multipliers. So the double stud made more sense. But Mike, you guys do use the engineered stud in all our tile locations, our millwork locations, and our 2-story stair locations.
Yeah.
And anywhere else?
It's gonna be stairs, 2-story walls, tile, all behind millwork too. We want to keep that stuff nice and flat.
Right. Make
so
sure
like
our
critical locations. Anywhere else, we're just gonna use standard.
Right, and again, it's really from a cost perspective. But going back, we are dealing with a lot of shear in this. They're really tall walls. This is a 26-foot 3 5/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
Am I have that right? Something like that.
Yeah, 26 3. It's either 3/8 or 5/8, but you close enough.
Yeah, within the quarter. And then we're locking around, and this is really where we're leaning on the engineer to tell us hey, how do we structurally build this house? And yes, right now it's it's overwhelmingly beefy.
Yeah.
But going back to those trusses, your trusses actually sit along this entire section and basically become like this big A-frame.
Yep.
We talked about the office last time, and then back here being our primary suite. One thing that you guys, I think at the end of the week last week, is prefabricating this entire gable on the floor, standing it up. We posted a bunch on Instagram and showed the crane, the lull with it way up in the air. But that's how we framed this one. You were just talking about how we're going to continue. Are we going to continue to prefabricate everything in this job? How are you thinking about phasing?
So we chunked the house up into, address one area, came up with the most efficient way to do it. Then we're going to hit the next section of the home. And we look at, we have this large deck to work on, and we can snap lines and do all our layout. Anything that we can do before getting it up in the air and making it more difficult and more dangerous to work on, we're going to do. So we've divided the house up into a couple different sections, just working with the framer and doing what makes sense. But we're going to do as much as we can on the ground and lift up larger sections instead of trying to stick build up in the air.
I'm seeing the siga wrapped into the subfloor. This is a thought. This is like work in progress.
Yeah.
Not only are we working with Rockwool, their technical team has been on site, but siga is coming out this week, I believe, or
they were out last week.
They were out last week. So what was their having them out here, obviously the goal is to understand how we actually pass a pen test. And to remind you guys, a pen test is basically how do we create a barrier around this whole house, and if you were to draw it, you never lift your pen off the paper. That's the ideal situation. What was the findings with siga being out here last week?
Yeah, so originally we were planning on doing the air barrier on the exterior of the house, but after seeing all these different roof lines and the way that sloped ceiling joist ties into the wall, it would have been interrupted, and it's really difficult to get like a flap over the top of the wall and tie it back into the ceiling. So we actually ended up putting flaps down before the walls went up and brought the air barrier to the inside of the house.
So you're effectively coming from your concrete foundation, which can arguably be your air barrier, your Fentrum tape to the My Vest, and then you're translating into or transferring into the inside.
Yep.
And then what's the detail, like where do we go from there?
So then this will get, right now it's just flapped in.
Yep.
So we'll fold that up, and then we'll be able to insulate and then come down with my Rex and tape that transition at the bottom.
What are we doing about our service cavity? Because we don't have a service cavity that we can really prevent any penetration, so we do have to detail that correctly. How are we doing that?
So with all of our electrical boxes, we're actually going to use air seal boxes.
Okay. So what does that mean?
So it's just it looks like a standard electrical box, but it has a flange around it, and it allows us to air seal around that box. So then,
So when you're running your barrier or your MyRex,
yep,
you can come around and basically cut, and you have a
it.
flange, and what, you use some sort of acoustical caulking
Yep.
to connect that?
Yeah, you could use that, or you can use the siga tapes, or just some way. You just got to get it sealed up.
And I know someone's going to be like, well, the drywall is going to ruin it for you, but that's where we work with our trade partners and explain, like, hey, this is a really important detail. If you guys cut it, let us know so we can tape it.
Use the rotozip on the inside of the box, not the outside.
That's a great tip. So as you work your way up, you kind of alluded to it, you're going to go up the wall, which is pretty standard, but what isn't in place right now is your ceiling. Your ceiling joists or rafters are actually lower than where this rafter hits your top plate. Is that
Yep.
right? So you're going to go up, and your intent is to follow the ceiling plane?
We are.
So we'll have to detail around the recessed lighting as well,
Yep.
which we have the opportunity to do that when everything's open. And a lot of this is actually V-groove ceiling, which will help too, because we'll be able to really kind of put that together step by step rather than worrying about cutting with a rotozip.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, guys, I appreciate you sticking around. Obviously, this roof is going up behind us. We're going to get out from underneath it, let them get the roof up. By the time next week, this roof should be on. We should be working our way to the right here, and that's an update for Needham. We'll see you guys next week.